Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parent Heroes podcast. My name is Zach, and the hope of this show is to bring some inspiration to parents out there and other educators helping folks along their journey. Now, when Kate and I settled in the area, she was often out and about meeting great people. And I remember the day she came home after she met our guest, and she was like, wow. Zach, wait till you meet this woman. I think she does more in her spare time than most people do in their work days. So I am very, very excited to have today as our guest, Carolyn Brook. Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Zach.
Well, I've got to say, it's a real joy. And we've chatted a few times about the work that we share in common, about some of your background. And I'd love to kick it off with a conversation about the ABC House, because this was how we first found out about you and some of the work you do. Maybe you could tell folks a little bit about that group and your involvement with them.
Sure. ABC is a national organization. Their mission is a little bit different than our local mission, but basically it is helping give under-resourced students a chance to get a better education in a different community. You know, we all wish that that didn't have to happen, and they should be able to get a good education where they live and with their families. But we all know that different communities have different levels and different standards of education. So in our particular cog of a better chance, we're called a community school program. There are, I think, about 20 of us now. There have been a few that have dropped out over the years for financial reasons. But basically, we take two students at each grade level. So when the house is full, there are 8 students, two freshmen, 2 sophomore, 2 junior, 2 seniors. They come and they actually live in the ABC house with resident directors. So it's basically a boarding program. But the big difference between us and a boarding school is that they are the only 8 kids at Darien High School that are not living at home with their families. So they live with the resident directors. They go to Darien High School for 4 years. We support them in every way, from feeding them to driving them to and from their activities, helping them pick their courses. And the ultimate goal is to help them get into a really good college after 4 years so they can pay it forward and help their families and kind of be an inspiration to others in their community.
It's such an inspiring program, and the students that you work with are just friendly, intelligent, incredible. It just goes to show, like you said, no matter where you land, there are incredible human beings out there. Tell us a little bit about the work you do with them specifically, because that's where we kind of first found some of our overlap.
So I have done everything. I've been involved I've lost count. I think it's 14 or 15 years
Oh,
now.
wow.
I started as a host mom. Each student gets a host family that they spend a weekend a month with, just to get away from the house and to have a different touch point. I have been co-president, I've been standards chairperson, but what you're specifically referring to is with one of my partners in crime. We do the college prep for our students. And that really starts, I mean, as early as freshman year with some general conversations, not too much focus. They need to be kids, but right through the way through helping them get the resources for standardized testing, helping them pick their college lists, helping them develop their personal statement, and ultimately filling in their Common App, right the way through to helping them analyze their financial aid packages to see what's most viable.
Yeah. And it's a whole world in of itself. Like I also started in education, but outside of it. And so through Kate, have come into this. How did you become so proficient in this process? Because there's a lot of details, there's a lot of things to know. It's very school specific, it's student
Mhm.
specific. What was that process like for you? Because I think some parents who are just guiding their own kids, let alone a ton of others, could take some lessons here.
So it started because I was an epic failure with my middle daughter. Um, my son followed a very easy path. My husband and I are Canadian. He chose a school in Canada, the one we went to. He was one and done. It was easy.
Yeah.
Middle daughter thought she wanted to go to Canada, decided at the end of junior year not to, never had looked at an American school. I'm trying to help her. I know nothing about the American school system. Long and the short is she didn't get in anywhere she wanted to go. She got into the 2 schools at the bottom of her list. ended up choosing one and has honestly lived happily ever after. So note to self, you end up where you belong. And if you have a positive attitude, she had an amazing time and she would do it all over again.
Oh, that's great.
So I do have a third child, and I swore that I would learn more about the system and what's involved before she went through it. And I'm just somebody who, when I start to look into something or research something, I just do it to the nth degree. It's just my personality. I don't know what 100% is. It's a problem sometimes because I don't know when to stop, but I tend to really keep going and going until I really understand things. And what I discovered in this particular instance is that the kids that I work with, both at ABC and another program that's Stanford based called Future Five, um, is that there's a huge secondary component that I never had to deal with my kids. Sadly for us, we were not, sadly or positively, we weren't eligible for financial aid. The
Mm,
kids that I'm dealing with, most of them need everything paid for. Some of them have parents who can't contribute anything. So while my kids were fortunate enough to be able to choose the school that suited them, these kids are looking for the school that suits them with enough money to be able to pay for 4 years so that they don't drop out. So it was a lot of trial and error, research, getting to know admissions people in different
mm,
schools,
yeah.
making those connections has been fantastic. Just, over the last few years, just seeing what has worked and what hasn't, who's gotten in where, how much money have they got, what schools, there are resources out there, about schools that meet full demonstrated need,
Yes.
guiding the students to those as opposed to, you know, suggesting they apply to Penn State where they're not going to get a nickel.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think we could easily have a whole conversation about just the world of college, how to navigate it, the resources. I think there is kind of a myth sometimes out there that, oh, if we don't have the full funds, then nothing is available. But there are tons of resources. There's tons of groups out there and people that help with that. What I'd love to maybe shift to a little bit is I think at least at the moment, if I understand correctly, like the position you're doing is purely volunteer. There have been paid positions and there are some, but this is just work
no,
you're doing out of the love of your heart, right?
I would never do this as a paid position. First of all, I'm not qualified, pure and simple. I'm not I have not taken the UCLA course for college counselors. I probably should. But I have visited probably over 50 campuses and have done my homework over and over again. But also, I get such joy out of helping people who probably would have had a very hard time navigating this on their own.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the kids I work with are the first in their family to go to college. So their parents have no idea how to help them. And then you get into the whole, excuse me, FAFSA debacle this year, and
Ooh.
and it's a mess.
Yeah.
So the joy I get from that
Mm,
is unquantifiable versus me charging somebody, no offense to, what you and Kate do, because you do
yeah.
it beautifully, but um, I don't want to work for those who have other opportunities and other resources.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I don't want the pressure from a parent who thinks that their
Mm,
2.8 student belongs at Harvard. These kids are appreciative. Their parents are just, they're so respectful and so glad that somebody's helping their child.
wow.
It's a different dynamic, I think.
Totally different dynamic. I believe you. It's a very different process that way. And I'm curious, in one of our conversations, you got to share a little bit about you growing up and some of the inspiration I think you got from your parents and the work they did. Maybe you could back up a little bit and tell us about how volunteer work, or we want to call that just like the giving back, the being involved in the
Mhm.
world around you. Share a little bit about your upbringing and what you saw in that area and how that might have inspired and directed the work you're doing now.
So I grew up, as I said, in Canada, in Montreal, had two wonderful parents who, always made sure we appreciated what we had. I didn't grow up in the upper, we were firmly, middle class, maybe upper middle class, but certainly weren't part of the wealthy set. And my parents believed that, we were still extremely privileged, which we were, and that meant reaching out in the community and giving back in any way, shape, or form. My earliest memory of my parents' involvement was they were very involved at the time with the church that they went to, or that we went to, that were bringing Laotian families into Montreal,
Oh,
the
wow.
boat people, as they were called.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's politically incorrect in this day and age, but they were called boat people back then. And I can remember as a young teenager with our youth group, painting an apartment for this family of Laotians that was coming in. Um, my father has sadly passed away, but my mom still keeps in touch with Robert Vongsai, who was the child of the first family that came over from Laos that they sponsored. And
Uh,
he's her godson. And this is I don't know, almost 50 years on. I mean, it's amazing. So that we started with that. So that was just, part of my upbringing. You get joy, you give to others and you can get joy from it. And what I started discovering as I got older was that if you find something that you love to do, then it's not work, and then you enjoy it even more. So when I first started my career and my working life, I was trying to find something to do that I thought was worthwhile. And somebody mentioned an organization that helped disabled kids ski. And I'm a huge
mm,
skiing fanatic. I'm an avid skier. So this light bulb went on for me because I'd been searching for something and everything was like, oh God, that's going to be such a drag. I don't want to go do that every week. But this was like, oh my gosh, I get to go skiing every weekend. This is
This is
awesome.
great.
2 winters while I was working full time, Monday to Friday in the advertising agency world, I would then on Friday night go north of Toronto and I taught skiing Saturdays and Sundays to disabled kids. The second year, I taught two girls aged 8 and 12 who were amputees. So I skied on one leg for the whole winter with them. And these girls could go down any run on the mountain. They were phenomenal and such an inspiration. So that was kind of my realization that if I could find something that I truly loved,
Mm.
then I was more than happy to fill as many hours as I could doing it. So that's just kind of been it's fun. I don't do it for anybody else but me. It's kind of selfish.
Yeah. I love that. And that was one of the main things. I was like, we have to share some of these stories with folks. And I think the beautiful thing that you said, because there's the question of like, well, how do I fit it in? How do I find out what to do? Do I just go do this? Maybe like volunteering at a soup kitchen is a common one that I think pops into people's minds, but there's so many creative ways that our passions can be shared with other people and that we could do things that are helpful but are two-way helpful, right? The joy of helping, but also in areas that you love. I know watching my mom, for instance, she did a lot from coaching rowing, which she got into from her own passion, or helping students with autism go and play with horses and get to know them and through therapy that way. And just all these passions that she had somehow turned in a way of giving back. And always we're encouraging kids to do that, but
Yep.
hopefully this can be some inspiration for parents as well to partake and engage.
But it has become actually, just to kind of bring it back to the college process, because
Please,
that
yeah.
started off, it has become an important part of the college process because the schools want to see an array of things that you've done. But I'm pretty confident in my conversations that seeing another captain of the lacrosse team or, you know, they see the same things over and over again, and they're really looking for that special nugget, and they want kids who really are putting themselves out there. And in particular, for the kids that I'm working with, who may not get enough funding from the schools that they ultimately want to go to, when they start applying for outside scholarships, the vast majority of outside scholarships seem to be based in volunteerism. So when they apply for these scholarships, and they range from maybe $500, some of them are tens and 20 and $30,000, but they want to know about your volunteer, how many volunteer hours, what are you doing? And I think some kids, like they study, you study to the test, you study what you need to the test. Some kids do it because they think it's a necessary evil. But there's also a way of guiding them to volunteer in an area that they're passionate about or, an expert in. Like a lot of my kids are Hispanic and there are a couple of them want to be lawyers. Well, there's a wonderful organization in Stanford called Building One Community that, that helps immigrants. And I've had kids that have taught English to people there or helped, started to learn about the legal system or done some translation or whatever. So sometimes there's a good fit.
I love that, and maybe we could dig in a little bit here because I think, at least in my experience, sometimes helping students find a passion, right? Like this conversation starts, oh, I don't know if my kid really has anything they're passionate about, or the kid doesn't know. Have you had some experience or things you could share of like how you maybe help students find out what they might be interested, or how they can convert something that they didn't even know as a passion or could lead to open more doors with that?
I think it's a combination of things. I think sometimes it's just dumb luck. You happen to find, you happen to find something that fits and they go, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just brainstorming with them, talking about things, and maybe it's something they hadn't even realized that they liked. So for instance, this is not, with respect to the kids that I'm working with, but my own daughter wanted to do something volunteer wise and she couldn't find it and wasn't sure. And all of a sudden, one of her friends mentioned this opportunity in the East Village. And you referenced earlier soup kitchens. Well, this is kind of a soup kitchen on steroids because
Uh,
it's all organic food. The whole sort of premise and basis, as I understand it, is we're not going to make or serve anything that you wouldn't want to eat yourself. So it's all incredibly high quality. And Avery is a very gifted cook, and it's one of her passions. And she spends a lot of time cooking and eating, like we all do. But she's found this amazing organization with people from all around the world. And they now have refugees in the kitchen working with them and bringing their recipes and their expertise and their knowledge. So sometimes you just stumble upon it. And then it was like me with the skiing and it just clicked. Um, but with a teenager, sometimes it takes a little more digging.
a little more digging, a little more exploring. And I think that that's a good message for parents too, because I think that there is a bit of a message of they have to do X, Y, and Z, and they have to do it so crazy. And some families push hard in that direction, and some might even back off because, oh, well, that seems insane, quite frankly. And letting kids explore and something where even like cooking, maybe they're not going to be a professional chef, but this could lead to so many opportunities. And wouldn't you say that it's not just the checking the box, this leads to a much more fulfilling, richer life,
100%.
relationships, long lasting, that sort of thing, right?
I'm convinced that if you're doing it to check that box on your application, it's going to be read that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing it with heart and you love what you're doing and you can bring that passion out, maybe in a supplement, maybe it's in your personal statement, maybe it's in a conversation that you have when you're being interviewed for a school, that's going to shine through. Kind of the rote, yep, I volunteer and I do this 2 hours a week, and it's not going to get you anywhere.
It isn't. I agree with you 100%. And I think for parents who are out there who don't have the kids in high school, maybe haven't experienced that, you going and getting involved just makes it so much easier and sets that precedent. It's all about what can we do in a way that's natural and just kind of flows in that direction. And so I love this. I think that hopefully, folks, you're listening. You're now thinking, oh, I wonder if I could do this with this, or maybe I should
But
explore that.
you just said something that I think is really important. Why not do a mother and daughter, father son, father daughter, volunteer together? I remember years ago volunteering with my daughter at Person to Person in the toy store. They do this amazing Christmas toy store for all the person to person customers. And they have this whole hall set up, and the kids go off in another room and the parents go in and they go shopping and they get to pick out a present and a book for their kid for Christmas that they wouldn't normally be able to afford themselves. And I was one of the elves in the toy store with my daughter one Christmas. It was fun. It was fun, but you can do
Yes.
it together.
Do it together. Oh, I'm so glad you point that out. Yeah, what a better way to do all things. I love it. Well, as we kind of reach an end or a summit here, however we want to phrase it, One of the things I always like to end on, it's a little bit personal for me because, I've been in the education world in one way or another, through a lot of different roles, seen it through a lot of different avenues. Right now, helping Kate, if you haven't met Kate, she's the one back there on the wall, and helping her grow this college coaching business. But really, my longer term goals are in having a larger national impact on the education system, something that can really be. I've always worked locally, small scale, at the community, which I love, and I'd love to pursue something on a bigger level. I don't think it is overboard to say that there are some problems with the education system, or just with how we approach education and what's available. But there's also so many creative things. So part of the reason I want to bring these guests on is everyone in their own right is showing how there's solutions abounding everywhere. Maybe you could share a little bit if you've had insight or had thoughts, like are there certain things that you've seen that have been problematic with either the education system at large, maybe on smaller scales, and what you see as some potential solutions or folks out that are doing great things to change that and improve it?
I mean, I think the two issues the biggest issues well, three. One is the incredible imbalance in the educational system throughout the country. I mean, because it's run state by state and there's no national standard, it's a mess. I mean, you'll have a community here that has an exceptional, educational system, and you'll go 3 minutes in the other direction, and you'd sit there going, yeah, I'm not sure I want my kid to go to that school. I mean, even, town by town, there is such a discrepancy in the level of education. I think the second thing is how the towns are viewing their funding. I mean, even the stronger school systems are cutting back on some of the things that I think are the music and the arts programs, the language programs, all the things that make people's lives enriched and make them stronger people. And instead, they're, using that money, diverting that money for some other non-educational purpose in the community. I think that's a shame. But I also think the cost of education at the college and university level is out of control.
Nuts.
Out of control. I mean, I was blown away. One of the girls with whom I work, got her financial aid package and the cost of attendance for a very good liberal arts college. I mean, it wasn't Amherst or Williams, which are always rank at the top, but it was somewhere I'd have been very proud for my kids to go. And the sticker price, by the time you add in books and spending money, is $90,000 a year.
A year.
90, 90.
Year.
A year.
Yeah.
And you compare that, for example, my middle daughter, who's the one I said I failed epically in helping her, she actually did get into McGill in Montreal, which is the #1 university in Canada. It has a worldwide reputation. Now, granted, she has a Canadian passport and, it gets a huge break on tuition. Her tuition there, she would have been considered a Quebec student, so an in-state or in-province student, was $4,000 a year.
Kidding me.
Wow. 4, not 40, 4. So you add in your room and board to that, all in at the top university in the country, it would have been just over $20,000 a year. Now, that may have changed in the last 5 or 6 years, but still, she went to a school which at the time was probably 65,000, and she could have gone to a high, if you believe ratings, a higher rated school for 20,000, a third the cost. So our whole cost structure here is totally out of control.
Totally out of control now, man. I see it too, and that was something that was not on my radar, but now very much regularly we see. I don't know that I have myself a solution to that. Anything come to mind on your end?
Well, yeah, I mean, I love the fact that the schools that have the larger endowments are really making those schools accessible to the kids that can't afford it. But then you've got this huge dichotomy again. You've got the kids who are on the very low income spectrum who will get everything paid for. You've got the kids on the high end of the income spectrum whose parents will pay for everything. And you've got these kids in the middle who may get some funding, but are still trying to come up with $40,000 or $50,000 a year. It's impossible. So they're getting completely lost in the shuffle. I do think, you take a school like a Princeton, for example, whose endowment is so big, apparently, I can't remember the statistics, so I'm going to get this wrong, but apparently they could not charge a penny for tuition and have everybody come for free and, pay all their endowed chairs and everything else, and they would still have, they'd still be able to operate.
Yeah.
And yet they're charging tuition of, 50 grand or 60 grand.
Yeah.
So, maybe, and the other thing I find amusing, I went to 2 schools in the last few months who have a sticker price of X, and they give every student, I think it's, $20,000+ in scholarship, every student. I'm like, why wouldn't you just reduce it? But I think there's this mentality that if it's more expensive, it must be better.
It is. And, I was reading, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go on.
No, it's just out of control.
Oh, yeah. I was reading an article recently about Clemson, which, as you probably know, the Southern schools are kind of becoming more desirable for kids. Yep. And they've spent the last 20 years allocating a lot of their funds instead of going to students who might need it or in between, giving grants to those at the highest level who may or may not need it to try to draw in a different caliber student. And it's really interesting, the whole game. And, as someone myself I've taught in public schools, I've gone to them. I've also gone to community college. Kate, who's done Princeton fellowships, has also done community college. I don't know that it's on everyone's radar, but we're big advocates of, I love what you said. Look, wherever you land with a positive attitude, you're going to do great. Although we're literally in the business of helping kids into college, my heart is always like, well, what is best for you? Why are you going? What's the long-term plan? Because I don't even know if college is the best solution for everyone, although there's so many benefits to it, of course. But you mentioned,
what about trade schools or some of the incredible programs and
yes,
the vocational programs at a community college, vet tech or daycare worker or whatever. Yeah. Not to mention the technical HVAC, plumbing, electrical. You're set for life.
Yeah. And I think that this is a conversation we've started to weave in because a lot of our friends as business owners, are in that space. And we see like the average student who maybe goes undeclared and ends up with a degree and a ton of debt versus going in and getting a trade and learning some business. Like they tend to be on average in a much better place for life, right? In many factors. So I love that we get to bring
that's a whole different show, though.
Whole different show. Maybe we dial it in for those families and parents out there who do want the best for their kids. Do you have any insight on, besides finding a great school, maybe in the home? Like, what are things that you think that can be instilled that supplement the education? Right, not everything we learn in school that's of value. Any insights or ideas there?
Honestly, just some of the basic life values, respect for other people, communication skills, learning to look somebody in the eye when you're talking to them. You're going to have to interview for some of these schools. Just, but the whole respect piece. The other thing that I hammer home with the kids that I work, I keep calling them kids, or not kids, but the students with whom I work, thank yous are free. Sprinkle them liberally. So, if they speak to an admissions counselor about something, then within, an hour, I want a thank you note going. Thank you so much for the time you spent with me. I really appreciate it. The insight you gave me on blah, blah, blah has really helped my thinking in terms of what I'm trying to get out of that. It can be 2 lines. If you really have the time, if they've done something and gone above and beyond, write a handwritten note.
Yes.
How many do you think they get? None. I've seen some of my students get into schools where I never imagined they'd get into with their GPA, but they kept the genuine contact, genuine respect, genuine thank yous. And guess what? They landed. So
now that is a note to end on. I could feel my mama smiling down from heaven. Write thank you notes, look people in the eye, all these great lessons. So I think that is a beautiful way to end it. And on that note, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for all you're doing, for sharing. And I hope for those listening that you got some inspiration today from this. So please, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and a subscribe. Drop a little thank you to Carolyn for being a guest today.
No need.
Go out there and do great things, everyone. Thank you again, Carolyn, for coming on today.
All right, take care, Zach.